I'm going to say this wrong. I'm so used to saying Precos. Observatory system. It's a long name. It's basically to tell you about a network of 12 monitoring stations in the river that keep a pulse on all sorts of variables from oxygen to turbidity, and you'll learn more from these wonderful researchers here. The sign showcases that effort in an attempt to get citizens engaged with how river monitoring informs practical things like restoration and policy and shipping and commerce and all sorts of things. And I'd like to introduce Stuart Finley from the Cary Institute, and he's going to kick off the day. And then Fran Dunwell from the Hudson River Estuary Program will conclude and shed light on this exciting project. So, without further ado.
Okay, thank you, Laurie. And thanks everyone for coming out. We tried very hard to arrange some good weather, and this is just the best we could do, and I apologize for that. The message for today is really about engaging people in the Hudson River and, in broader view, the natural resources of the state of New York. As you probably know, the Walkway gets thousands of visitors a day from all walks of life. Some are quite local, that live in Poughkeepsie or Highland. Some are from around the world, and they come to see the river and participate in the Walkway. And the idea of the display is to bring some of the scientific knowledge we have about the river right to them as they're going on their walk or their ride. And so the display that Laurie alluded to is just to my left here. And it receives information on water quality that's collected at the Marist waterfront just behind you, just maybe a mile north of the Walkway. And those observations, those data are sent by radio signal up to the Walkway, and they're refreshed every 6 minutes, so it's very close to real time. There are a number of messages we want people to get from this information. The first is that the Hudson River is very dynamic. It's changing in one way or the other almost every second. The easiest thing to observe, and the thing that most casual walkers up here probably don't realize, is that the tides come and go at this point of the river and for some distance north. The tides rise and fall by about a yard twice a day. And you can tell by looking over the side, actually we are just about at high tide right now, so the water's not moving. But in another half an hour, the water will start going the other way, and the display will show that the elevation of the water, how high the water is, will start declining. And you can see that, every 6 minutes it'll go down and down and down a little bit more. So the message is that the river is very dynamic. And that's the simplest way it's dynamic. As part of the display, we try and have a small sort of science factoid that people can take away with them. And people that look over the railing and have a look at the water, they're always impressed with how murky the water looks. And in fact, it is on the murky side, no doubt about it. And we have some information up there from earlier in the summer when we had some very heavy rains, and the clarity of the water was much, much worse than it is today. And so in early July, middle of July, the turbidity, which is a measure of lack of clarity in actuality, the lack of clarity, the turbidity was about 200 units. And today, someone will tell me if I'm wrong on the numbers, the turbidity was down to about 40 units. And so the river is much clearer now than it was earlier in the summer, although it will never go to being a crystal clear river. Probably never was in its history, and not likely to happen in the near future. Other stories we intend to bring up here in the future. This past summer it was fairly wet. Perhaps next summer will be a fairly dry summer, and there are issues of salt water intruding up the river. The Poughkeepsie water intake is, again, just north of the Walkway here, and in certain summers they do have to be concerned about whether they can draw that water in to be used as drinking water. One of the things the display updates constantly is the conductivity or the salt content of the water. And so in a dry summer there will be a lot of interest in where is that salt water. How far up has it come?
Yeah, sorry.
Laurie mentioned that there's a network of 12 stations. I looked at the West Point station this morning before I came over here. And in the past month, the salinity at that station has about doubled, just because it's been fairly dry recently. I don't think that salty water is going to get here, but it's a way of looking essentially in real time. You can watch how the conditions in the river are changing. You can track the things you care about the most. And again, it's a way that even the casual walker on the bridge here can get a sense of what's going on in the river beneath them. So we hope that many of the visitors will take at least a quick look. Some of the visitors I know study the display a little bit more and get a sense. But we hope that if nothing else, they get the message that there are people out here trying to study the river, understand what's happening, tracking how it's changing, trying to forecast what may come in the future, and essentially looking after the river because it does in fact belong to everybody, and we want people to have some sense of engagement with it. So the network and the display are very useful from a science point of view. We've learned a lot. There have been some new things discovered. It's confirmed some things we were pretty sure we knew already. It's useful on a day-to-day. And at this point, I think Fran will speak to some of the other uses of both the network and possibly the display, because it does serve multiple uses. And Fran Dunwell is the coordinator for the Hudson River Estuary Program, which is advisory to DEC, and will speak about these other issues.
Thank you, Stuart. Hi, everybody. I'm Fran Dunwell. I'm the Hudson River Estuary Coordinator for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Our program is helping people conserve, restore, and revitalize the Hudson River and its surrounding valley and watershed. We accomplish our mission through partnerships. These days, it would be too expensive for the state to try to develop a monitoring system using advanced technology for the whole Hudson River from New York up into the Mohawk Valley. But by working with partners like Marist College, like the Cary Institute, we're able to come together and share a common vision, a common method, and produce information that helps us manage the Hudson more effectively than we ever could have dreamed of. I grew up in this area over in Poughkeepsie. I remember when the Walkway was a burning bridge. I really enjoy the ability to come out on the Walkway as it is today and stroll across the bridge and enjoy the river scenery. What our project does is it gives people one new way of looking at the Hudson. Almost think of it as a window into the unseen river, where you can understand what's going on with the tides, with the currents, with the oxygen in the river, what's happening with storms. All of these things are recorded in real time, and this display is a way that people who enjoy the Walkway can come and see another dimension of the Hudson. They can see the vital signs of the river. So our project really today is a marriage of nature and technology, helping use the advances we have in scientific instruments to be able to better understand and manage nature, specifically manage this river, help communities understand what's happening, for example, with tides and currents, with storm surges like we had with Hurricane Sandy, and also be able to relate this to information on the restoration of fisheries and on the habitats of the Hudson. So really, today is about partnerships. It really shows how we can be working together for a greater good, how we can leverage our resources. What might cost millions of dollars for us is actually something we can deliver for about $150,000 a year through our partnerships. So this would not have been possible without groups like Marist College and the Cary Institute teaming up to help us put this all together in a common vision with a common method to really get a much better understanding of the river and how it functions. Stuart, should we answer a few questions?
So I think we have time to answer some questions if there are any, or other points you'd like some elaboration on. How much does it cost?
Well, running the system annually, the entire monitoring system from New York City up into the Mohawk Valley is $158,000. However, this station itself costs much less than that.
Yes. Yeah. So the hardware you see here and the part at Marist that makes it work was probably on the order of $10,000, perhaps. The hardware for the whole network is something in excess of $250,000. But the big part of making this work is the people and the support for the people that look after it and worry about it day to day and use the information to make sure things are running smoothly. So it's not cheap, but as Fran said, without everybody sort of chipping in, it would be tremendously more expensive. This is one of the instruments. This is one of the instruments that's at these various locations. These are currently on the order of $20,000 each. The good news is they last a long time, but still there is the upfront capital cost that's fairly significant.
And where does the money come from?
Our portion of it, the support for the system, comes from the New York State Environmental Protection Fund, and the support for the signage
is from the Hudson River Improvement Fund, which is managed by the Hudson River Foundation. So it was essentially a grant. We sent them a proposal saying we think this would be a good idea, and they agreed. So here it is.
And its lifespan, you said, is going to be about 20 years?
It's only been up for a few months. We think it's good and solid and weather tight. We'll find out. It's held up well so far. It hasn't been through a winter yet.
Jeremiah?
Is this the only one?
It's the only one on the walkway.
It's the only one on the walkway. There's another one up at Albany that's operated by the USGS, and there will be one, I'm looking for Elena at Piermont.
And there's one at Norrie Point already.
So there's one at Norrie Point Environmental Center just north of here, and there's one that will be functional again at Piermont. Piermont had a hard time with Hurricane Sandy,
And we
so
had
it's
one,
just
but
coming
it was
back.
totally wiped
Yeah,
out.
it didn't come through so well.
So this is really a scientific display that is also kind of user-friendly.
It's intended to be user-friendly. The data are the same data that go to the website and are used for scientific purposes. This is just a way to sort of bring it to the people as they pass by. And again, we try very hard to make the signs mean something so that they understand what it's all about. And we'll have these rotating stories that change periodically, sort of what's the current issue we're trying to tell you something about. Right now it's about clarity. As things cool off, we'll probably have one on temperature, both the air temperature and the water temperature.
How does this box get its information? I was a little late, so.
So there's an instrument like this at the Marist waterfront, and the data from that gets sent by radio signal up to a receiver and antenna inside the box, and then it gets processed by some instruments in there and goes to the display.
So this information in this box reflects whatever's passing by Marist at
Correct.
the time?
Correct.
That's right.
Correct. So it's as close to being under the walkway as we could get.
Any other questions? Yeah, Nancy?
On the readout, SP reductance is the only one I can't wrap my head around. Can you explain that?
Yes, so the conductance, it's a measure of how salty the water is. And so right now the readings are about 200. In true ocean water, the readings would be something like 40 or 50,000. At West Point this morning, they were something like 3,000 or 4,000. So by using the network and sites up and down, you can tell how far up that salty water has come. This year, I don't think it will get to Poughkeepsie, but it's been pretty dry. In other years, it has gotten to the point where it arrives at Poughkeepsie and they can't use the water intake at high tide, for example. One of the issues that's facing the Hudson is climate change, like so many other places. And there are two things that are likely to affect the Hudson. One is as sea level rises, the water in the river will rise because it's essentially at sea level now. So that's going to be happening. And the salt water will probably intrude further upriver each year. So this is, in a sense, a baseline of what's happening now, so we can see how these changes are going to come about in the future.
Is this connected to that?
This is an anemometer that I believe the parks folks put up. It is not connected although I guess it could be. It's not now. Many of the sites do have meteorology. This is not our meteorology.
Okay, sounds great. Can I have one of these? These are the press
Absolutely,
packs?
yes. Thank you for coming.
Sure.
We'll stay around for a few minutes if other people have questions.
Either. Okay, so I'm Stuart. Actually, I'm in here, so it's STU.